Do you want to be the father of my son? She asked. The words hit harder than the cold wind off Highway 27. Jamal Rivers didn't flinch, but the wrench in his hand slid slightly over the bolt. He looked up slowly, purposefully, his dark brown eyes meeting hers through the clouds of engine steam. For a moment, time stood still between them. The young black mechanic in the oil-stained hoodie and the blonde in the tight, soaking dress that clung to every curve like a second skin. Jessica shifted from foot to foot, suddenly aware of how soaked her dress was. It had been dry when she left the house. Something simple, elegant, dark blue, and maybe a little too tight for a trip with her son. But when the radiator burst and the drizzle turned to a steady rain, it clung to her hips, her waist, the curve of her back. Now under the overcast sky and Jamal's quiet gaze, she felt the heat rise to her cheeks. "It's not that," she stammered, taking a half step back. "I was kidding." "Whatever, I don't know why I said that." Jamal turned his attention back to the radiator cap. "Overheating," he said dryly, wiping his hands with an old rag from his back pocket. "You need to let it rest for a while. Maybe you pushed it too hard." Jessica didn't answer. She was still trying to recover from her own boldness and the awkwardness of standing there in her wet dress, her chest rising and falling with every breath. What kind of person said that to a stranger? But Jamal didn't look angry, just quiet, reserved. She watched him work, precise, patient, his long fingers moving like a man who knew engines as well as he knew his breath. There was a strength in his silence, a dignity that bothered her far more than the shouting. In the back seat, Owen peered out through the fogged window. His small face was pale with worry. Jessica opened the door and whispered, "Almost ready, honey." Owen looked past her, his eyes fixed on Jamal. "He's like a superhero?" Jessica almost laughed. "No, kid. He's just a mechanic, but he showed up like a superhero," Owen said, dead serious. Jamal poured bottled water into the reservoir, the steam hissing. The road wine tugged at his jacket as he closed the hood with a crisp click. Then he stepped back, wiped his hands, and finally looked Jessica in the eye again. "You can go," he said. "Keep the heater on while you're driving. It'll take the heat out of the engine." Jessica opened her purse. "Let me at least—" "No," Jamal said, his voice even. "That's not why I pulled over." He turned, walked over to his old Ford pickup, and climbed in without a word. The engine coughed, then settled into a low hum. He glanced at them one more time before pulling away, not with irritation, not with pity, but with a kind of quiet understanding, like a man who's seen too much to expect gratitude. Jessica stood on the side of the road, keys in hand, heart pounding. The rain had stopped, but her dress still clung to her in a way she couldn't ignore. Could she forget the way Jamal had deliberately not looked at her body, as if choosing respect where others might not? That was what had disarmed her most. As she drove away, Owen whispered from the back seat, "You should have gotten his number." Jessica didn't answer. That night, after she'd put Owen to bed in their small rented house outside Cedar Grove, she found herself sitting at the kitchen table with an empty legal pad. The smell of coolant still lingered faintly on her coat. She stared at the page, then slowly wrote two words, "Mechanic." Below them she added, "Black truck, Route 27. Fixed everything, took nothing." Then she circled the last two words. Her phone vibrated. A text from her sister Beth. "Are you okay? Owen told Mom some guy saved you on the highway. She's picturing a serial killer. Call me." Jessica smiled weakly. If only her mother knew how far from danger he was. Down the hall, Owen's voice came faintly through the wall. "Good night, Dad," he whispered before sleep claimed him. Jessica froze. Her throat tightened. She walked to his room and quietly opened the door. "Honey, did you say something?" Owen turned. "Nothing. I was just talking in my sleep." She leaned over and kissed his forehead, but she didn't get much sleep that night. Across town, Jamal sat on the porch of a small one-story house with peeling paint and a warped door. The air smelled of pine needles and old oil. His mother, Claudine, dozed in a chair inside. The television still hummed with static. He sipped coffee from a dented thermos, staring out into the night. Her words echoed in him again. Do you want to be my son's father? Jamal shook his head with a bitter laugh. These people here say the most incredible things, he muttered under his breath. But he wasn't laughing anymore, because what he couldn't admit, even to himself, was that those words, half a joke, half a challenge, had reached some part of him that had been silent for so long. Some part that remembered what it was like to be a 9-year-old kid waiting for a father who never showed up. He stood, glanced back at the house, and then went inside, locking the door behind him. He'd leave early tomorrow. He had 2 renovations scheduled, and his mother had a doctor's appointment. Life didn't wait for feelings. But that night he dreamed of a little boy handing him a wrench, and of a woman's voice, clear and calm, saying something no one had ever said to him before. 3 days later, Jessica Palmer found herself parked outside a body shop that technically didn't exist. There was no sign over the door, no logo on the window, just a plain white garage on the edge of town with peeling siding and a flickering porch light that buzzed like a tired bee. But it was an address she'd found by scrolling through the back of a church bulletin posted in the Cedar Grove Community Center. Repairs first, services Thursday and Saturday 7:30 a.m. It was Saturday. She hadn't told Owen where they were going, only that they had something to do. He sat in the back seat, his legs swinging and humming, clutching the same notebook he'd been holding since their car broke down earlier this week. Jessica glanced at the time. 7:26 a.m. She was the first out, adjusting her denim jacket. No wet dress this time, no heels, just jeans, boots, and a tight ponytail that made her feel less like a woman and more like a mother on a mission. Owen followed, tugging at her sleeve. You think he remembers us? Jessica sighed. Let's find out. They reached the side door of the garage. The air smelled of motor oil and wet gravel. She hesitated, then knocked. The door opened almost instantly. A teenager stood in the doorway. A white boy with freckles and a long body. Are you lost? He asked. I'm looking for Jamal Rivers, Jessica said. He fixed my car on Tuesday. I'd like to pay him back, or volunteer. The boy hesitated, then, from the back, a voice. Let them go, Michael. Jessica's heart leapt. That voice. Calm. Low. Jamal. Michael stepped aside. Inside a space that looked like it had been cobbled together from a junkyard and a church mission. Folding tables piled high with toolboxes, extension cords snaking across the floor, a half-eaten box of donuts sitting next to a pitcher of coffee, and 5 men of varying ages working on the underside of a dented minivan like it was open-heart surgery. Jamal was against the far wall, hunched over a clipboard. He turned, saw her, and froze for 2 full seconds. No one said a word. Jessica felt heat rise in her cheeks. Hi, she said quietly. Jamal sat up straight. What are you doing here? She nodded at Owen. He wanted to see you again. I wanted to see this. What are you doing? Jamal nodded curtly. Did you bring gloves? Jessica held up her hand. A new pair, bought the night before. She hadn't been sure which ones she wanted, so she'd asked the guy at Home Depot what mechanics wore. You'll be helping Michael sort generators, Jamal said. We have 5 stops today, and we're working hard. Jessica looked around. You let people join in. Not usually, but you came anyway. He looked at her, not annoyed. Not exactly cheerful either. Just submissive, like he'd long ago learned that resisting some things was a waste of time. Don't trip over the wires, don't get in the way, don't talk too much. 3 rules, got it? Michael handed her a plastic container full of starters. Just separate the ones with cracked housings. Anything that rattles, throw it in the trash heap. Jessica knelt down next to the table, trying not to wince at the cold concrete floor. Owen hovered around Jamal, pad of paper in hand. Can I draw you while you work? Jamal raised an eyebrow. Why? You look cool when you fix things, like Batman but quieter. Jamal didn't answer, but he didn't say no either. By the time they loaded the first truck, Jessica's fingers were numb and slightly blackened. She hadn't realized how physically taxing sorting could be. Jamal handed her a thermos of warm coffee. The only thing we don't share, he said. She took a sip and nodded. It tastes like gasoline. This is master coffee. Be thankful it doesn't chew through the cup. The first stop was an elderly woman in a mobile home on the outskirts of town. Her car wouldn't start. Jamal and another man named Wilson popped the hood, diagnosed the dead battery, and swapped it out for a new one from the back of the van. Jessica watched as they worked, not quickly but carefully. Every action was deliberate. No shortcuts, no bragging. The woman, Ms. Lillian, offered Jamal $5. He declined. "Have you bought a battery yet?" Jessica asked as they drove to the next house. Jamal nodded. "I bought it last night with my own money." "It's not about the money." Jessica leaned back in her seat. "You know, you can ask for help, right? Or support. Help comes with strings attached. We don't work with strings attached." He said it like a credo, like something he'd told himself 1,000 times. The next 3 stops blurred into a rhythmic squat. Lift, clean, tighten, check. Jessica found herself holding flashlights, handing tools, even supervising the jack. Owen shadowed them, sketching everyone's faces, asking questions, occasionally handing out snacks from the little sack lunch he'd packed. At the last house, Angela's, a mother of 3 with a rusty minivan, something shifted. Jessica saw Jamal laugh. Not a real laugh, just a breath through his nose, the corner of a smile. Angela's youngest daughter climbed into the back of the truck and pretended to be a mechanic, asking Jamal to fix the leg of her stuffed doll with a screwdriver. And he did it, gently, tenderly, and Jessica felt something shift in her chest. Not romance, not yet. Just something like gravity. A pull toward a man who didn't need anyone to know he was doing good to be good. The sun was low, casting amber streaks across the gravel outside the garage. Jamal handed her a rag. "You did it." Just did it? You didn't trip over any wires. That's a win." Owen tugged at his arm. "Next time. Can I help you change your clothes?" Jamal looked at him. "Next time." Owen smirked. "There's a next time, right?" Jamal looked at Jessica. Unreadable. She didn't speak, just waited. He turned to Owen. "Yeah, man, I guess there might be." Monday arrived with a light drizzle and a sky so gray that even the bravest mornings felt hesitant. Jessica stood at the kitchen counter, stirring instant oatmeal, while Owen sat at the table, scribbling furiously in his notebook. His latest drawing showed Jamal under the hood of a truck, one hand holding a wrench, the other resting on Owen's shoulder. It was crude, childish, but eloquent. Jessica glanced at the page. "You gave him a cape?" Owen nodded. "Because he's the only superhero who carries tools instead of a gun." Jessica smiled, though something about the simplicity of the statement struck her in the chest. She went to the window. Across the street, the garbage truck groaned and hissed on its morning rounds. Normal life went on, but something inside her had not returned to normal since Saturday. She still hadn't told her sister, still hadn't told anyone what she was doing, volunteering on weekends with a mechanic she just met, letting her son tag along with a man who barely spoke. And yet it felt more right than anything had in a long time. That day, while Owen was at school, Jessica sat down at her laptop. The screen was blank, the cursor blinking rhythmically, a quiet, defiant invitation. She wasn't going to write a story. Not really, but her fingers moved anyway, typing words she hadn't planned. "He fixed more than just the engine. He fixed the silence between us." She paused, erased, typed again. "Some people show up in trench coats, others show up with sockets and steady hands." The words felt honest, not ostentatious, not polished, just true. Her phone vibrated. An unknown number. She hesitated, then answered. "Jessica Palmer." "Yes. This is Pastor Hill from Greater Mount Hope. One of my parishioners said you were interested in a group called Fixing Forward. Is that true?" Her stomach clenched. "I volunteered. That's all. I understand. I only asked because we had concerns before. This is not an official nonprofit. No tax returns, no oversight." Jessica bristled. "So what?" "Well, in today's world, people want to know where their support is going. Who's responsible if something goes wrong? Sometimes people just do good deeds without needing a paper trail, Pastor." There was a pause, then a quiet chuckle. "I like your spirit, Ms. Palmer, but I hope your heart is as willing as your tongue, because if you write about them, you'll attract attention they might not want." She ended the call. That evening, she drove to her mother's house to pick up Owen. Her mother, a stern woman in her 70s, greeted her at the door with her usual grimace. "I heard you spend the weekend with a mechanic," she said. "Are you trying to get into the news?" Jessica kept her voice even. "He's not just a mechanic, Mom." Her mother crossed her arms. "He's not Owen's father." Jessica looked away. "No, but maybe he's the right person for a kid." There was a pause. Her mother's gaze softened. Just barely. "Don't get your hopes up too high. Hope has sharp edges when it's shattered." Later that night, Jessica found Owen asleep on the couch, his notebook across his chest. She picked it up carefully, flipping through the pages. One of them made her pause, a crude drawing of an old family photograph. Her Owen in the empty space in the shape of a person with the word "someone" written inside. She closed the book, kissed his forehead, and whispered, "We'll work this out." Across town, Jamal sat by his mother's bedside, holding warm broth to her lips. Claudna's hands shook as she tried to hold the bowl herself, but Jamal wouldn't let her. "You're too protective of me," she murmured. "You say that every night. Do you think about that woman?" Jamal paused. "She brought her son into the workshop, helped sort the parts." Claudna smiled faintly. "You let her stay?" "She showed up, didn't say much, worked hard." "Sounds like someone you used to be." Jamal looked at his hands. The calluses were deeper. Scars from a lifetime of fixing things that didn't want to be fixed. "You think I'm doing the right thing?" Claudna reached out and touched his chin. "There's right and there's good. They don't always look the same, but I've never seen you so unsure of something that wasn't worth it." Jamal didn't answer. He just kept feeding her, spoonful after spoonful. The following Saturday, Jessica and Owen returned to the garage just after sunrise. No hesitation this time. No nervous knocking. Micah ushered them in, as if they'd always belonged there. Jamal met them at the back of the truck. He handed Owen a small pair of gloves. "For you," he said. Owen beamed. "Can I change a tire today?" "We'll see." He turned to Jessica. "Have you ever used a socket wrench?" She grinned. "Show me once, and I'll remember." They pulled out in a convoy, trucks, a van, and a rented SUV piled high with donated parts. The air smelled of pine and exhaust. Jessica sat in the passenger seat of Jamal's truck. Her hand touched the clipboard filled with addresses. "They're all in town, some outside Ashbridge." "You drive this route every weekend?" "Most of it." "Why?" Jamal stared ahead, his voice quiet. "Because some people don't have anyone who shows up." She looked at him. "Who shows up for you?" His jaw clenched. He didn't answer. They pulled up to the first house, a double trailer tucked into the edge of a dirt lot. A man in his 40s came out, limping with a cane. His name was Donnie. His car had a bad alternator and a cracked belt. Jessica handed out tools, held flashlights, passed bottles of water. She was no longer a guest. She was part of the rhythm. Later, while the others worked on the van, Jessica leaned against the fence, watching Owen show Micah how to shade faces with a pencil. Jamal came up to her. He has an eye for detail. He sees things most adults miss. He watches you. She turned, surprised. "What do you mean?" "When you're quiet, he's quiet. When you're afraid, he notices. You don't say things out loud, but he hears them anyway." Jessica swallowed. His dad wasn't like that. Jamal didn't ask for more. They stood in silence, the wind rustling the leaves in the trees. Then Jessica said, "Do you ever get tired of carrying someone else's load?" Jamal looked at her. "Only when I start pretending I don't want to." She met his gaze. The moment stretched. Before anyone could say more, Owen came running up out of breath. "We fixed it. Donnie's car works." Jamal smiled for the first time since she'd met him. And in that smile, Jessica saw something rare. Not salvation, not promises, just a presence. Just a person who showed up. That night at home, Jessica opened her laptop again. This time she didn't stop typing. The story was never meant to be published. Jessica wrote it the way some people pray, quietly, secretly, with no audience but the small piece of her heart. She called it "The Man Who Fixed Things" and filed it in her personal folder, but the words burned with too much truth to remain hidden. The following Tuesday, while Owen was at school, rain pattering softly on the window panes, She found herself reading it out loud to no one. Her voice wavered only once, in the part where she described the moment Jamal gave Owen gloves. He hadn't said much, just the right size, like someone who didn't need praise to recognize a child's aspirations. She saved the document, closed her laptop, and told herself that was enough. But by Thursday, her fingers were itching again. The story wouldn't rest. That evening, while browsing the website of a small local parenting magazine, she saw a link for submissions with the prompt, "Stories of Unexpected Kindness." Without giving herself too much thought, she attached the file, added a brief note, and hit send. She hadn't told Jamal. Not yet. She didn't know if she ever would. Saturday arrived, bathed in cold sunlight. Jessica and Owen were already waiting outside the store when Jamal pulled up, his truck rattling slightly, the exhaust belching steam into the morning air. He got out, a thermos of coffee in hand, and nodded hello. "You're early," he said. Jessica shrugged. "Thought we'd beat the traffic." Owen ran to the back of the truck. "Can I ride in the toolbox?" "No," Jamal said without turning around. "You'll break your arm, your mother will blame me, and I don't fix bones." Micah came around the corner, lugging a box of brake shoes. "We've got a two-seater stop first, Mr. and Mrs. Diaz. She teaches Sunday school. Their Buick won't start." Jessica helped to load the van. As she handed Jamal a folded blanket, their fingers brushed. She pulled her hand away quickly, but not before noticing how warm his palm felt against the chill of the morning. They drove in silence, gospel singing blaring from the old radio. Jessica looked out the window, watching the tall Georgia pines flash by. "Are you okay?" Jamal asked after a while. She hesitated. "I wrote something about it, about you, about work." "Yeah." Jamal's eyes never left the road. "Did you publish it?" "No. I sent it to a small local publication, a parenting blog. Nothing national." More silence. "I didn't use your name," she added. He took a sip of coffee. Okay. He nodded. "People are going to say what they want. Let's just let one of them say it right." Jessica exhaled slowly. "I just wanted people to know what real looked like." They pulled up to a small ranch where an older couple stood on the porch. Mr. Diaz had a cane. Mrs. Diaz wore a cardigan with embroidered flowers and greeted them like family. The Buick's battery was dead, but Jamal replaced it in less than 20 minutes. Owen chatted with Mrs. Diaz, who let him pet her cat, and Jessica helped sweep leaves from the driveway while Jamal worked. When it was all done, Mrs. Diaz offered him a $5 bill. Jamal looked at her, then at her hands, arthritic, thin, but still holding out the money with quiet dignity. This time he took the money. "Buy the grandkids something," he said softly, handing the bill back. Mrs. Diaz blinked, then gave him an unexpected hug. "You're not what the world expects you to be." "Thank you." Jessica lingered as they walked back into the garage, the others having left and the sun beginning to set behind the rooftops. Jamal was wiping his hands on a rag, leaning against the bed of the truck. "So what else is there to the story?" Jessica asked, coming up to him. "Everything." He looked at her. "Even the part where you asked me that crazy question on the highway." Her cheeks flushed. "Especially that part." He smiled. "You scared me. You scared me first." They stood there in silence, the kind of silence that didn't need to be filled. "I meant it, you know," she said quietly. Jamal looked at her, his brow furrowing slightly. "Not as a proposal or a fairy tale ending," she explained, "just as a possibility, a real one." He didn't answer, but his hands moved to the edge of the truck, close enough for her fingers to find his. They didn't hold hands. They just let them lie there, warm and still. That evening, Jessica received a letter. "Congratulations! Your story, 'The Man Who Fixed Things,' will be published in our November issue. If possible, we'd like to do a follow-up interview with you. Please respond by Monday." She stared at the screen. Her first instinct was to close the laptop, but then she thought of Owen and Jamal and the people waiting on broken porches who no one else came to see. She didn't answer. Not yet, but she didn't delete the message either. Across town, Jamal was locking up the garage when Claudine called. He answered on speakerphone, folding tarps in the background. "Are you working late again?" she asked, her voice quiet but clear. "Long drive?" The Diaz family needed help. His mother paused. You look tired. I'm fine. Another pause. And that woman? She still comes. She's a good one. Jamal didn't ask what she meant. He already knew. He hung up the phone, sat in the back of his truck, and looked at the stars. They were dim, hidden by the lights of the city, but they were still there. A boy had drawn him in a trench coat. A woman had written about him as if he mattered. And for the first time in years, Jamal didn't feel like he held the world on his shoulders. By Wednesday, the article was out. Jessica hadn't expected much. It was a modest post on a regional parenting blog, sandwiched between turkey brining tips and holiday sales. But within 24 hours, the story had quietly exploded. Dozens of shares had turned into hundreds. The comments section was overflowing with gratitude, curiosity, and disbelief. More men like him, please. He takes interns? Find the guy and give him a TV show. Ouch. Jessica sat at the kitchen table, her phone buzzing with new notifications every few minutes. Owen, munching on cereal next to her, beamed proudly whenever his name was mentioned in passing. You didn't write my full name, did you? He asked. Just a boy? She ruffled his hair. Now you're the mystery hero's partner. Jamal wasn't named directly in the story, but anyone in or around Cedar Grove could connect the dots. And by Thursday morning, the dots had turned into visits. Boxes of parts arrived at the garage. A retired teacher brought a thermos of homemade chili and a folded envelope with $200 inside. A woman from Atlanta had driven 2 hours just to say thank you. Jamal stood at the edge of the garage, arms crossed, watching the local news van make a slow circle around the block. He turned to Jessica. You promised it wouldn't be much. She held up both hands. I didn't tell them. I swear. He didn't answer right away. He just looked at her, then back at the growing pile of packages and letters forming next to the roll-up gate. Why now? He finally asked. Jessica shrugged. Maybe people got tired of reading about broken things. Maybe they just needed to see someone fix something. Jamal didn't smile, but he didn't leave either. Later that day, after the volunteers had left, Jamal and Jessica stayed behind to sort through the parts. Owen sat in the corner, painting a superhero costume for Jamal, with a wrench emblem on the chest. Jessica labeled the boxes while Jamal took apart the spark plugs. They want to do a sequel, she said carefully. An interview. Maybe even a short video. I don't do interviews. I know they'll twist it, make it into something else. I'll be there, she said. I'll make sure they don't. He didn't look up. You trust the media too much. I don't trust the media. I trust myself, and I trust you. That stopped him. He set down the box he was holding and met her gaze. You trust me? He said, not angry but surprised. She nodded. Enough to let my son follow you around every Saturday. Enough to write the truth. He glanced at Owen, who was now talking about the battle between Captain Wrench and the Rust League. I don't want him to think I'm anything other than who I am, Jamal said quietly. He doesn't think that, Jessica said. He thinks you're the one who comes to the rescue. That's enough. That evening, Jamal took his mother to the doctor. The clinic was full of unfamiliar faces. Young nurses typed quickly on keyboards. Older men with tired eyes sat on hard chairs. Claudine sat next to him in the waiting room, leafing through a magazine she could barely read. Have they put you in the magazine yet? She asked, nudging him. Not yet. You should let them. People need stories like yours. Real ones. He shook his head. They don't need my face. She turned toward him, her fingers lightly brushing his wrist. You think you're hiding, but God is already pointing to you. That evening, Jessica stood in her driveway, holding the phone with shaking fingers. She had just gotten a text from a national syndication group. They wanted to do the story for a radio show on Thanksgiving. No names, no pictures, just her voice and the sound of Jamal working. She glanced toward her garage where Owen had used chalk to draw a giant wrench on the sidewalk. She texted Jamal. The radio wants to run workshop sounds. No cameras, no names, just tools and voices. Is that okay? A few minutes passed. Then, okay, as long as you read. Jessica stared at the screen, then slowly typed back. You mean say it on air? Yes. Your voice? And not some strangers? She didn't know what to feel. Gratitude, pressure, maybe both. She arrived at the garage before everyone else at dawn on Saturday. Jamal was already inside, wiping down the table where the parts were stacked. "Are you nervous?" he asked. "A little. You'll do fine." Jessica watched him work, the way his body moved with quiet efficiency, the way he never raised his voice, never made unnecessary movements, the way he said little, but when he did, it was all there. "Do you always get up this early?" she asked. "I started when I was 16. I needed some quiet before the world made demands of me." She nodded. "I understand." They didn't talk much after that. They just prepared. The radio producer arrived with minimal equipment, just a handheld microphone, a shotgun recorder, and a warm voice that respected boundaries. Jessica read her lines softly, slowly, sitting at the same table where she'd first taken apart the generators. Jamal didn't hang around, but he didn't leave either. When she finished, the producer leaned back and smiled. "There's a lot of noise out there," he said, "but this sounds like grace." Jamal walked him to the door, shook his hand, and said nothing. That night, they listened to the show together. Jessica sat on the worn leather couch in Jamal's living room. Claudine was asleep in the back. Owen was curled up with a blanket at her feet. Jamal stood in the doorway, arms crossed, listening to her voice come through the speakers. He hadn't fixed the world. He didn't fix every broken thing, but he fixed what was in front of him, quietly, tirelessly, without asking for applause, and sometimes that's enough to start over. When the show ended, silence filled the room. Then Owen whispered, "Mom, you sound like you're in a movie." Jessica laughed through her tears. "I guess that means you liked it." Jamal finally spoke. "You told it right. I tried." He looked at her, and for the first time, there was no distance in his eyes. Just the present, just a man who had come and finally let someone stay. By the next Monday, everything had changed and nothing had changed. The shop still smelled of motor oil and burnt coffee. The same flickering light bulb still buzzed above the garage door. Jamal still arrived before dawn, rolled up his sleeves, and went to work with the quiet rhythm of a man who measured time not by watches, but by the things he fixed. But outside, the world was paying attention. The radio spot went viral. It was rebroadcast on morning shows, picked up by national platforms, and turned into a podcast segment that spread faster than either of them could have predicted. Jamal's soft, careful, short voice was retained only once. The moment he said, "You fix what's in front of you, not the world, only what's within reach." The line was quoted, shared, printed. People called him the Quiet Mechanic, a nickname that Jamal found both absurd and oddly accurate. Jessica's inbox was flooded with messages. Her editor, who hadn't spoken to her in months, offered her a regular column. Television crews requested interviews. A veterans organization in North Carolina asked if Jamal would speak at a community event. A pastor in Houston offered to help expand Fixing Forward across the country. And Jamal? He stopped answering his phone. Jessica found him that evening, standing in the corner of his garage looking through the overhead door. It was getting dark, and the light cast him in silhouette a soft orange against stacks of cardboard boxes filled with donated parts. She approached cautiously. "There was a man in Denver offering to send you a new lift kit." Jamal didn't turn around. "I don't need a lift kit." She waited. "I don't want banners or business cards," he went on. "I don't want 15-minute reports and men in suits asking about logos. I just want to fix the damn cars." Jessica stood next to him. "You're allowed to stay small, Jamal, but people want to help." "They don't want to help," he said quietly. "They want to own it, shape it, make it fit their story." "You think I did that?" Now he turned, looked her in the eye. "No," he said. "You told the truth. This is different." She exhaled. "Then let me keep talking about it." He looked tired, more tired than she'd seen him before. Not from the work, but from the attention. It weighed on him like a heavy coat he'd never asked for. "I never set out to be famous," he said. "I was just trying to be helpful, and you still are," Jessica said softly. "But maybe you're more helpful now than you thought." Jamal didn't answer. The rest of the week passed in the blink of an eye. Each day, more letters, more visitors, more volunteers. A teenage girl who heard the story came to the garage with her father's old set of wrenches and asked if she could learn. A veteran with a prosthetic leg was offered the job of picking up and dropping off car parts from donors. Still, Jamal stuck to his routine. Early mornings, hot tools, quiet repairs, short answers. When people asked for interviews, he declined. When someone mailed a custom raincoat with "fixing forward" embroidered on the back, he handed it to Owen without a word. Jessica tried to protect him when she could, fielding calls, filtering inquiries, politely declining sponsorship deals, but it was short-lived. The shop grew. People kept coming in, and slowly, imperceptibly, Jamal wore out. One night after Owen had gone to bed and Claudine had rested, Jessica stayed in the garage while Jamal finished changing the oil. He closed the hood, wiped his hands on a rag, and looked at her across the empty space. "Can I ask you something?" he said. "Sure. Why did you ask that question on the first day?" Jessica blinked. "What question?" He glanced at her. She smiled weakly. "You mean the one about being Owen's father?" Jamal nodded. She stepped closer, her arms folded loosely across her chest. "Because I saw the way you looked at him. Not just kindly, constantly like you saw him. Not just a kid on the side of the road." Jamal leaned against the truck. "You scared me that day. I scared myself." There was a pause. "I'm not his father," Jamal said quietly. "I know. I don't know how to be. You don't need to know yet. Just keep showing up." He looked down, nervously fiddling with the edge of the rag. "I didn't have a father growing up," he said finally. "My mother did everything. My father, he left when I was 4. Sometimes I think I remember his voice, but maybe I made it up." Jessica felt the words sink into her chest. "I guess I never thought anyone would ask me to take this place," Jamal added, "like I wasn't allowed." "You are allowed," Jessica said softly. "You're more than welcome. You're invited." He said nothing, but he didn't look away. Something was different that Saturday. They were in a rundown duplex outside of town. A woman with 3 kids in a broken-down van sat on the porch, looking exhausted and cold. Jamal crawled under the car with Wilson while Jessica occupied the kids with juice boxes. Owen sat next to one of the kids, a boy about his age, and explained how a timing belt worked, using stick figures and hand gestures. The repair had taken longer than expected. The axle was warped. Jamal's knuckles were raw, but they got the car started. As they were packing up, the woman, Ms. Gracie, called out, "Hey, how much do I owe you?" Jamal looked up from the toolbox. "Just keep going," he said. "Keep trying to get where you need to go." She blinked, then nodded slowly, wiping her eyes. On the way home, Owen leaned forward in the back seat. "You're kind of my real dad now, huh?" Jessica turned but said nothing. Jamal glanced at him in the mirror. "What makes you say that?" Owen shrugged. "My dad promised to show up. You just show up." Jamal didn't answer right away, but later, after they got home and Owen had gone to bed, he walked up to Jessica's porch with 2 things in his hand, a spark plug keychain and a folded piece of paper. He gave her both. "What is this?" she asked. "A gift," he said, "and something I've never told anyone." The note was written in Jamal's large handwriting. "I don't know what fatherhood looks like, but I know what presence looks like, and I'm still here." Jessica looked up, her eyes wet. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "I know," Jamal said, and for the first time, he walked into her house. Not as a visitor, not as a mechanic, but as something more, something beginning, something real. Jamal stood at the entrance to Jessica's living room, his hands tucked awkwardly into the pockets of his work jacket. The air smelled of cinnamon and something faintly sweet, maybe vanilla, maybe the kind of candles people light without thinking. It was warm, and yet for a moment he felt out of place, as if he had brought too much of the outside world inside. Dust, oil, old ghosts. But Jessica did not rush him. She did not offer coffee or make conversation. She simply took his jacket, hung it by the door, and returned to the couch as if it were the most natural thing in the world. He sat down next to her, unsure what to do with his hands. She tucked her legs under her, watching him with quiet patience. "I haven't been in someone's house in a long time," he admitted. She nodded. "This isn't someone's house. This is ours. Mine. And now, maybe a little of yours." He looked down at his hands. This is a lot. It doesn't have to be all at once. Outside, the wind rustled the branches, and somewhere down the street a dog barked. Inside, everything was quiet. They didn't talk about labels or promises. They talked about simple things. Her favorite movies from her teen years. His mother's Sunday ritual of making sweet tea, like medicine. About how Owen had started drawing a whole comic book series featuring Captain Crankshaft, and how Jamal was secretly proud of it. At one point, Jessica turned to him and said, "You know what's funny? This all started because I was wearing the wrong shoe and broke in the right place." Jamal smiled. "No, you were wearing the right shoe. I just happened to be there." They didn't kiss that night, but their fingers brushed, intertwined, not by accident. And when Jamal finally stood up to leave, Jessica walked him to the door and rested her forehead lightly on his chest. He stood still for a moment, then gently placed his hand on the back of her neck. No words, just warmth, just presence. The next morning, Jamal arrived at the garage earlier than usual. Wilson was already there, sorting through donated filters. "You look different," Wilson said without looking up. "Different? How?" "Less like a man trying to run from something." Jamal grinned. "I still have the same boots." "Yeah, but this is the first time you've ever stood still." After that, they worked in silence. Around 8 a.m., a new volunteer arrived. A young woman in her 20s wearing oil-stained coveralls and walking with a confident gait. "My name is Shauna," she said. "I've read about you. Are you accepting help?" Jamal looked at her. "Can you tighten a lug wrench?" "Better than most guys I know." "Oh," he handed her the wrench. "Let's see." Jessica picked up Owen from school that day. He climbed into the car, his backpack slung low, his grin wide. "Guess what?" he said. "My teacher played a story on the radio in class." Jessica's eyes widened. "Really?" "Yeah." "She said I could bring in the pictures next week. Said the story made some of the other kids cry a little." Jessica smiled. "Are you proud?" Owen nodded. "Yeah, but mostly proud of Jamal." "Me?" She reached across the center console and squeezed his hand. "So did I." Jessica visited Claudine that evening. The older woman was relaxing in her chair, a knitted blanket draped over her lap and a crossword puzzle book on the table next to her. "Well, look who finally decided to come by and say hello," Claudine said, her voice huskier than usual. Jessica knelt down next to her. "Would you like some company?" "If you brought pie." "I brought stories," Claudine laughed. "Even better." "Oh." They sat and talked for almost an hour. Jessica told her about the interview requests, the charity events, the way Owen kept drawing Jamal with broader shoulders and bigger hands. "He draws him like he's 10 feet tall," Jessica said. Claudine smiled softly. "That's how you draw people kids trust." Jessica hesitated. "Do you think he's ready for this? I mean, to us." Claudine's eyes grew sharper. A child. He'd spent his whole life carrying around the weight of other people's problems. Isn't it time someone gave him something whole? Jessica blinked, holding back tears. "I don't want to be another job he feels obligated to finish." "Then don't be the one place he doesn't have to fix." Later that evening, Jamal drove to Jessica's house. He didn't bring any tools or parts, just 2 paper cups of hot chocolate and a book Owen had accidentally left in the garage. He knocked once and waited. Jessica answered the door in sweatpants and a faded varsity sweatshirt. She smiled. "You brought hot cocoa and homework," he said, picking up the book. Owen ran to the door. "Thanks. I'd burn if I lost this." "You're doing well," Jamal said, handing over the book. "Captain Crankshaft wants his origin story." Owen grinned, then darted back into the house. Jessica stepped aside. "Come in." Jamal hesitated. She touched his arm. "You're not a stranger anymore." He walked in. They sat on the couch that night, silently sharing cocoa. Not the empty silence, the kind that means you don't have to fill every moment, the kind that says, "You're safe here." Owen fell asleep in Jamal's lap, his head on his chest, breathing evenly and deeply. Jessica whispered, "You don't have to agree to anything right now. Not to me. Not to him." Jamal looked at the boy curled up next to him, then at her. "I'm not saying yes," he said quietly. "I already did. That day I didn't pass you on the highway." Jessica nodded, her eyes shining. "Sometimes families start with papers and rings. Sometimes they start with a flat tire, a silent man, and a boy who just wanted someone to show up and stay. Jamal had never been to a school assembly before, not as a student, and certainly not as someone who was applauded. But there he was, sitting stiffly on a folding chair at the front of the Jefferson Elementary gym, sandwiched between Jessica and Principal Hulbert, while the walls echoed with the sound of 100 little clapping hands. Owen stood on the stage, awkward in his pressed khakis and button-down shirt, holding the microphone with both hands as if he could fly. Behind him, a huge poster showed a crude but charming drawing of a superhero in overalls holding a wrench. Captain Crankshaft, clearly inspired by Jamal. "My mom says heroes don't always wear capes," Owen said into the microphone, glancing at Jamal. "Sometimes they just fix things and ask for nothing in return. This one fixed our car and then our family." There were sighs and several adults wiped their eyes. Jessica's hand found Jamal's on the chair between them, their fingers interlocking in silent solidarity. As the applause rang out again, louder this time, Jamal looked down at the polished floor and smiled, unsure what to do with all the warmth that had washed over him. After the crowd dispersed, Owen ran up to Jamal and gave him a hug. "Are you okay?" the boy asked. Jamal crouched down to get to his level. "Yeah, I've just never been called a superhero before." You better get used to it," Owen grinned. "I told the whole school." They were walking home that day. No car, no rush. Just three people, walking leisurely down Maple Street like they owned it. The sky above them was clear and blue, with clouds like brushstrokes. Neighbors waved. One older man on his porch nodded at Jamal, the kind of nod reserved for veterans or priests, men who've earned a quiet respect. At home, Claudine sat in the living room with the newspaper folded in her lap. "You made it to page 7, she said without looking up. Jamal raised an eyebrow. 7 lines above the obituaries and below the mayor's dog show. That's solid ground." He laughed, settling into the chair across from her. Jessica brought over lemonade and slices of sweet potato pie, still warm from the oven. "That's too much," Jamal said. "You better get used to this too," Jessica said. Later that evening, Jamal got a call on his phone. An unknown number. He almost missed it. "Mr. Knox," the voice said, "this is Marcia Carter from KJX Radio. We've heard a lot about what you did for Jessica and Owen. We were wondering if you could come in for an interview." Jamal blinked. "An interview?" "Just a quick spotlight on local heroes, nothing special. We thought people could use a story like yours." He hesitated. "I'm uncomfortable in the spotlight." Marcia laughed softly. "You don't have to be comfortable. Just talk like you did when you stopped and helped someone in the rain." He finally agreed. Jessica drove him to the studio a week later. On air, Jamal was silent at first, choosing his words with the same care he took in choosing bolts and gaskets. "I didn't do anything special," he said into the microphone. "I saw someone who needed help, and I stopped. I think more of us could have done that. Just stopped." The interview lasted 8 minutes. By the time they got home, Jamal's inbox was filled with messages. 3 days later, a letter arrived. It was from a man in Iowa who had heard the news on the radio. "My daughter's car broke down last winter," it read. "No one stopped. I didn't realize how much it hurt until I heard about you. You reminded me of who I used to be." Jessica found the letter on the table and read it twice. "You change people," she whispered. Jamal looked away. "I'm not trying. I know. That's what makes it real." But not all the responses were kind. One night after closing up shop, Jamal walked to his truck and found a piece of cardboard under the windshield wiper. On it, in thick black marker, someone had written, "Stay in the car business. Don't play family." He stared at it, his jaw clenched. The words were sharp, familiar, like a voice from his past. He hadn't told Jessica, not that night. Instead, he'd driven to his mother's. She was in the garden, kneeling next to a bed of flowers. "They say you're a hero," she said without turning around. Jamal knelt beside her. "Do you believe that?" She pulled a weed with slow fingers. "I believe you showed up when it mattered, more than most." He exhaled, watching her hands work. "Someone left a note, said I should stay in my lane." Finally, she turned to him. "Then maybe it's time to blaze a new trail." At home, Jessica saw the change in his eyes. She didn't press, just brought him a cup of tea and sat beside him in silence. Later, Owen came in, dragging a blanket, and curled up between them on the couch. "Are we a real family yet?" he asked sleepily. Jamal looked at Jessica, and there was no doubt in her eyes. "Yes," he said quietly, "we are." That night, Jamal sat at the kitchen table long after everyone else had gone to bed. The letter from Iowa lay next to his coffee mug. A pen was in his hand, hovering over a blank sheet of paper. Finally, he wrote, "To anyone who has ever driven past someone in need, stop next time. Not for praise, not for gratitude, but simply because someone once did this for you." He folded it, put it in an envelope addressed back to the radio station, and slept through the night for the first time in years. The smell of pine and sawdust still wafted around the new porch. Jamal stood there on a Saturday morning, a drill in one hand and a mug of coffee in the other, examining the last screw he'd driven. It was nothing special, just a small extension with 2 sturdy steps. But it meant Owen could jump off without twisting his ankle. It also meant something else: consistency. Jessica came out barefoot, her flannel pajama bottoms brushing the wood. Her hair was pulled back in a loose braid, and she was holding a plate of warm rolls and turkey and sausage. "You always build things when you're nervous," she said. "Who said I was nervous? The man who redid my fence, tuned up my lawnmower, rewired my porch, and now built a whole set of stairs. What makes you dart around like a cat in a thunderstorm?" Jamal took a slow sip of coffee. "He's on his way." "Your dad?" she asked, raising her eyebrows. Jamal nodded. "He called last week after he heard the radio interview. Said he was surprised. Said he wanted to talk." Jessica set down the plate. "That's good, right?" He didn't answer right away. Memories came flooding back. His father's yelling voice, doors slamming, the silence that stretched across dining tables like cracked asphalt. "It depends on what he wants." Around noon, a silver Chevy pulled into the driveway. An older man got out, tall, with a cane and a careful gait. He wore a tattered military jacket and sunglasses, even though the clouds blocked the sun. Jessica and Owen walked into the house, giving Jamal space. "Jamal," the man said, "you look taller than I remember. I was 16 the last time you saw me." The man nodded. "That's true." They stood in silence for a moment. Then Jamal pointed to the porch. "Sit down if you want. I built it." "It looks sturdy," his father said, sitting down slowly. "I heard the story on KJX. Car woman, kid. You sound different. You haven't called in 10 years. Why now?" His father leaned his cane against the railing. "Because I didn't think you wanted me to call, and I didn't think I deserved it." "That's part of the truth," Jamal said sharply. "But I'm not here to fight. I'm here to ask you something." The old man reached into his pocket and pulled out a small envelope. "I'm dying, son. Stage 4 lung cancer. I have a month, maybe 2. I don't want forgiveness, but I want to see the man I raised, even if I wasn't there most of the time." Jamal looked at the envelope but didn't take it. "I raised myself. That's what I wanted to see. You did it. Without me, you became something good." For the first time, Jamal looked at his father, not as the towering figure of his childhood, but as a tired man, racked with remorse. "Come in," he said finally. Jessica baked scones. Inside the house, the atmosphere softened. Jessica greeted his father with a polite smile, and Owen, after a wary glance, gave him a drawing of the character, Captain Crankshaft. They sat at the kitchen table, and time, once frozen in pain, began to thaw. Later that week, Jessica drove Jamal to his second radio appearance. This time, he'd been asked to co-host a special about everyday stories of justice, people doing the right thing without cameras or likes or hashtags. "Ready?" Jessica asked as he buckled his seatbelt. "Yeah," he said. "It's funny, I used to hate my voice. I thought it didn't sound right to people." "Well," she smiled, "you were wrong." In the studio, the host introduced Jamal as a man who reminded us that small acts can move the biggest walls. He was asked about forgiveness, legacy, community. He answered calmly, but when the final question came, "What would you say to your younger self?" He paused, then said quietly, "Don't run from love, from pain, from family. Let it hit you, then decide to stay." That night, the station's website crashed from the number of people trying to download the episode. More letters poured in, from war veterans, from single mothers, from adult children estranged from their parents. One letter in scraggly handwriting read, "You gave my son permission to come home." A week later, the Alanale Community Center hosted a benefit. Jessica, wearing a long emerald dress, stood next to Jamal as they announced the creation of the Knox Hansen Initiative, a new program to teach auto repair and life skills to young people, sponsored by local businesses and named in Jamal's honor. As the applause died down, Owen tugged at Jamal's jacket. "Does that mean I get to learn how to understand engines?" "Only if you want to," Jamal said. "But you can," the boy smiled. "I already drew the logo." Jessica looked at him on the way back. "Did you ever imagine your life would look like this?" "No," he said, "but maybe that's the point. You don't fix your life by planning it. You fix it by showing up." While Owen brushed his teeth and Jessica folded laundry, Jamal walked out onto the porch. The night was quiet. Crickets chirped. The wood creaked softly beneath his feet, a reminder that even new things carry the weight of what came before. He pulled an old cardboard note from his pocket, the one that had once told him to only fix cars. He turned it over, scrawling on the back, "I've fixed more than this." Then he folded it in half and tossed it into the fireplace. As the flames consumed it, Jessica joined him. "It's a little chilly," she said, wrapping her arms around his waist and resting her head on his shoulder. "It's warm in here," he said, holding her close. "That's what a house does." And just like that, without drama, without music, without headlines, Jamal Knox finally stopped running. Not because anyone asked him to, but because he decided to.